Welcome to the Future of Less Work, where we explore how work is transforming one conversation at a time. I'm Nirit Cohen. Today, we're looking at one of the oldest corporate functions, finance, which is quietly becoming an epicenter of AI transformation. According to OneStream's new AI Pulse report, 3 out of 4 CFOs now lead enterprise AI strategy. That's more than CIOs, CTOs, or even HR, CHROs. It raises an interesting question. Finance sits at the intersection of data and decision making, but turning AI from promise to performance requires more than ROI, which is why I've invited Tom Shea, CEO of OneStream, whose mission is to transform the corporate performance management ecosystem. We'll explore how AI is rewriting the language of finance and what that tells us about the future of work itself. Tom, welcome to the Future of Less Work.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
You know, I have to say, I was surprised that CFOs are leading enterprise AI strategy. Do you think that's how it should be?
I do. There's a lot of reasons that I think it's pretty logical, and that is CFOs are kind of show your work type of function, right? And so as we think about humans being in this situation where we have to give over agency to these machines, you need proof, you need transparency, you need kind of certainty to feel comfortable. Just like if you were in a self-driving car, at what point are you going to feel comfortable to take your hands off the wheel? You kind of need these feedback mechanisms. So if you think of CFOs, the way I think of it is if it works for a CFO, it's going to work for almost any function in the business. And so I think that's why you're seeing a lot of the original, these first round of initiatives making their way through the CFO or having the CFO do some coordination because they're a really good filtering mechanism.
So, and I'll say this. So I have a master's in finance. So I come from this function. That's why I'm going to say this, because then I'm going to push back. And here's what I'm wondering out loud about, and I'd love your perspective. Isn't this the reason why this first wave of AI enterprise level implementation feels like it's about exchanging people for automation and just getting kind of through the productivity versus a complete redesign of what we could possibly be doing with these tools?
Well, when I look at this first round, exactly as you stated, humans are still very integral to the loop or to the value, right? So you think of right now, if we think of it in a corporate sense, so let's think of a typical enterprise or you and I sitting down to interact with artificial intelligence. It's not everywhere and reliable across all systems of the business, and the business doesn't. The AI doesn't know about our sort of sacred tribal corporate information. It only knows what it was trained about. So how does it get meaningful information to be able to help me do something in my daily job? I have to be the source of that information. I might take something, paste it into the chat window, give it context, and I'm heavily involved in supplying it information that I want it to be able to interact with. And then I'm also heavily involved on the back end as the editor to say, was that right or was that wrong? So if you think about it, the current value proposition of AI is very, very heavily dependent on humans supplying contextual information and then using this engine to help it get some efficiency in whatever you were going to do with that information. And then being the editor of the output of that information to say, I think this is going to be useful. It was 80% useful, and I can now refine it to get it to 100. But for finance, if you really step back and think about finance, it's a deterministic function. And that is there's one right answer for finance. You having a master's degree in finance, there's only one right income number. And when we ask for that number as a CFO, we need to know where it came from. Is it even though we found that right number, when I say contextualizing and making it useful, what does it mean? I might find the right number and I might be able to say, yes, that is the right number, but is it in the right state to even be used? Maybe it's not fully calculated yet. Maybe I shouldn't publish it. So there's all these, in the deterministic world of finance, it raises the bar for creating value for AI.
Okay, so you're saying something that I think is clear, and it's a transition thing, right? I mean, you're saying we can't let go of the wheel until we know the driver is being properly trained and doesn't make mistakes, or at least know more than we do, right? I mean, basically, that part's clear. I think the CFO has a lot more impact on where we choose and how we choose to implement AI at the enterprise level than just looking at that, the places where there's only one right answer, right? The balance sheet, for example. So we look at even the question of whether you're using it as an individual to, make your tasks better, or we're completely redesigning the use of intelligence or even, customer facing processes, or the impact, the ones that impact on the balance sheet.
I think it's really important for me, the way that I'm thinking about it as someone involved in creating what we think is useful technology for our customers. I'm really approaching it as in a way where I'm bifurcating into two different use cases. There's the deterministic use cases and the non-deterministic use cases. We're all heavily involved in non-deterministic use cases. Those are the obvious ways where we can do summarization, we can interact with whether it's a co-pilot, and it's easy for us to kind of say, yeah, this was really useful. That just took a lot of time out of my process. I can do a little bit of editorial work and I can publish. And so to your point, many parts of the organization can benefit from that. And I look at that as more of the kind of collaboration efficiency side of generative AI in an organization. But there's also other areas where, the way that we look at it in our organization, we're also looking at it from an expert system perspective. And what do I mean by that? I have many people that have deep domain knowledge about our technology and how they want to, how they've helped us write our code. What if I interview that and store that in a way that I can have that forever to represent that individual's knowledge and protect that information? So that's another way, what we consider the expert system, or that knowledge protection. And then the third leg of that stool is where you get both deterministic and non-deterministic. And that is, how do I help individuals execute their tasks, execute their job? And in finance, that's largely going to be deterministic. In other parts of the organization, for example, tech support, there's going to be a lot of textual information that could help narrow in the answer, and you're still going to have humans providing judgment. So you have this whole spectrum of value, but the hardest problem to solve are the deterministic problems, and that's the journey where you're truly going to unlock value. Because if you can reliably see what's going on in the organization, if I can reliably get an answer from AI and very quickly know if it's right or wrong, I'm going to start to gain a lot more confidence in that and be able to use it more deeply across the organization. So all three of these are true, but the hardest types of problems to solve, and once you solve that deterministic, it's a big unlock. And that's why having clean data, having safe access to that data, and being able to manipulate and understand it is critical. You bring up a really good point. One of the interesting conversations these days is we say, we don't quite say it that way, but it's, it's underneath what you're saying. Once the tools can do a whole bunch of stuff and I know I can let go, right? Then there are a lot of things that people do today, usually the more junior people that we bring in that do these deterministic activities, right? And so we see it in the data, right? So we've stopped hiring them because we say you don't need that, right? You manage an AI tool to do that, but you want the person that you're managing the AI tool to be able to ask the questions, to be able to assess the answer, to be able to evaluate. You can't afford to completely let go. How are we going to grow the next generation if we're not teaching them the basics? That is a really, really great question. And it's something that we have to be careful with, because if you think of, and I'm going to contextualize this for you from an engineering perspective. And the reason I say that is because we hire young engineers. Those young engineers have to then be trained, and eventually they become senior engineers. So how do we not create a gap in knowledge because of AI? And one of the early places that we are seeing sort of deterministic adoption is in coding. Because when you write code or you have a code assistant, you go to compile, it either works or it doesn't. So you know immediately if it was useful to you. But so fortunately right now, for those of us that are senior engineers that are creating, what it does is it supercharges us. And when you start thinking about some of the more autonomous agent capability in helping you code, our team uses it very heavily, and we kind of consider it an entry level, if that sort of intern level type of contributor. And to your point, that's a potential displacement of young engineers that we would have hired. But we have to be really conscious of that and not think, I don't think it's ultimately going to be a situation where we just say we're not going to hire entry level engineers, because we would ultimately create that huge gap for us. But we need to supplement and we need to have those entry level engineers do more meaningful work, not very simplistic, code check-ins and code reviews and the things that we're seeing the agents capable of doing, standardized refactoring. But that is a question we're all going to wrestle with.
With code, I always somehow worry a little bit less because, one, we have tools to know if it works or not. And two, the engineers quickly adapt to where we really need them. That's usually the first profession that adapts when technology shifts something in our work. But if you look at, for example, the people who are supposed to be using the tools, right, your finance people, that's a more interesting question, because we've got a lot of people doing Excel spreadsheets. And these days, you don't want them doing Excel spreadsheets anymore, right? So I learned to ask the difficult questions because I, made a mess of a whole bunch of Excel spreadsheets.
Well, that's a bigger problem that we're trying to solve in general. And that is, as a company today, you can't afford, if you really think AI is not going to fix that, you have 1,000 spreadsheets all over your organization and help you rationalize that. You still have to be disciplined. And that's why I think what you're going to see is a lot of the amplification of the value that comes from AI is going to come from the more platform-oriented enterprise software companies. Why is that? We're standardizing and unifying and contextualizing that information so that when AI comes to use it, we can generate a spreadsheet reliably. We can generate the number. We can give you context with documents that, support those numbers. And it's that holistic picture that comes into play rather than, just having an AI look at tons of different spreadsheets. You're not going to get the confidence that way. So they aren't mutually exclusive. It's not that we're going to say AI is going to fix data problems for a customer. And those that have really concentrated on fixing data problems are going to get an extreme amplification of what AI can help them do, because it's going to have that more consistent data that you can make sure that you know that it's accessing it securely. You'll be able to deliver more transparency, just like code. You'll know if it's right or wrong. You'll be able to, cite the source of the information. You'll be able to supply the surrounding, contextualized calculation status of numbers that you're looking at in the world of finance. But that'll extend to every other platform. If you think of human resources, right? We're going to have, very, important information over there that's quite sensitive about employees. So we can't just have, the way we think about it is, we can't take generic AI and have a foreign agent roaming around in these systems. They have to be built by the enterprise software companies so that you're safely exposing this information to AI in a secure and transparent way, ultimately making its way to the decision maker. And they can say, yep, that was useful to me. And I just saved myself all that time. And by the way, I want the AI to do this same task for me every week as if it were an employee that I had. So
how does that vision change the role of finance in an organization?
I don't know that it changes the role. The role of finance in an organization. What exclusive of AI is, everybody wants finance to become more of a partner to the business. So if we think about finance, there's a couple of different roles. What we call core, and that is the stuff that every company has to do. We have to do, financial planning, financial reporting. You have to submit your results to external authority. That's the stuff that you have to do. As a CEO, I expect that to just work and be as efficient as possible. But what I really want my finance team to do is to actually be able to go and embed with the different operational elements of the system, help them become more efficient, help us drive the results that we're looking for as a business. So with that being the backdrop of what everybody wants from finance is to do more. AI is going to help in the sense that the way that finance can do more is being efficient at the things that it absolutely has to do, so that it has more time to do the things that you want the team to do. So if AI can help finance close the books, identify anomalies more quickly, and just have more repetitive tasks, have things that need to be done on a regular basis, recurring basis, be handled by agents, you're going to create an efficiency that is noble. And that's going to allow that high value, high skilled financial analyst to spend their time in an area that you might deem more valuable to the business, which is working on some sort of operational challenge that requires, the financial thinking and the analytics of an analyst.
So do you think that, or do you see the kinds of things that would be possible when we've gotten a lot of the basics out of the way, at least in the sense that it's being taken care of with less effort?
Yeah, it kind of circles back to my opening statements, and that is, taking the human right now with so much human involvement, kind of human in the loop. We need to be able to safely have the agents interacting and see corporate information, see this contextualized data that would create a lot of usefulness to AI. We have to be able to give it safe access to that without a human involved in every one of those steps like they are today. That's the evolution that we're on. And then again, when the data comes out, it has to be highly transparent. We have to know that it was secure. We have to know that, the state of the information, not just that it was the right information, but the state of the information, because as a human, we might be publishing that somewhere where it has to be right. That could be in human resources. That could be finance. That could be IT. I might find a number that has to be right.
Myself, Tom, but that's also true today, right? I mean, we have financial data and financial system that we use to do whatever it is that we're doing with it. But the same thing goes for human resources and other systems. How's that different? I mean, I get that, we have new systems and new ways of accessing the data, but the essence of it is we have the data and we're accessing it today through systems. You're just changing that.
Well, I think the evolution that you're talking about is, and this goes down to that concept of agency, right? So over time, if we provide, and just kind of, I'll take you through the steps, what I think is the evolution that we're going to end up at. And that is, over time, once we're confident that, no, it's always sourcing the right information. We gave it safe access. We gave it secure access. It's not going to pull back information it shouldn't pull back, that because the agent's like an employee, really. And when it gets into all of this vast data that you have in your organization, and we start giving it access to that, instead of you being that curator as a human and saying, oh, I wanted to do some analytics on, a particular legal entity that we own, and here's its trial balance. And I would be the one that goes and sources that. I know reliably where that information is. I export it to an Excel file or to a CSV. I then use it and paste it into ChatGPT, and I have it do something for me. When I can reliably have the AI just go and find that itself, that'll be step one. And I have to be really confident that, hey, it didn't access the wrong information, it can use it. So that's step one in that evolution. The other then is, well, it gave me a result, and I started getting comfortable with, wow, I trust this. Eventually, the piece is, I'll just stay out of the way altogether. Maybe it will fully submit it to wherever it needed to be submitted. That's the trust that will build up. And I'll start giving over my agency and feeling less and less compelled to be the editor of the information, because the AI will be tightening it up more and more. And I can actually assign the full task from start to finish. And all I have to do is know, was the task done?
Yeah. Okay. So I think you're really focusing us, I think, in the first layer of the finance AI transformation, to say there's a lot of technically repeatable, supposedly simple, because once you can define it, you should be able to automate it, right? Processes. However, the risk is really high. So we really need to understand the visibility of the data, where it comes from, what gets done to it. It can't be a black box. I've got this. I don't know if it's probably not a very good analogy, but we've all gone through this with the tools, right? Where we asked the tools to do something and it made up sources, right? And if you weren't careful and double checked, you could submit something that was based on something that didn't exist, which was very embarrassing, right? So we all learn to fact check. But it still is at the second level of the evolution now, right? I could still have brainstorming with the tools. In fact, I just spent the entire morning trying to get a number of Gen AI tools to analyze something for me that they should have been able to do. And I got really frustrated with them because they weren't thinking like me, right? Which is probably a good thing. So, but you're not there yet, right? You're not, here's what the next level of finance transformation will look like from an AI perspective.
That is the value when that I think companies like OneStream, it's our job to make that interaction that you just described reliable, repeatable, which will lead to adoption, which will lead to trust, which will lead to full automation. It's no different than all of us thinking about self-driving cars. At what point are you just going to be comfortable getting in the back seat and watching a movie?
Yeah.
Right? You're gonna put it on self-drive for a while, and you're gonna hold onto the wheel, and but over time, after maybe a year, and it navigated you safely to your destination, you're gonna see in this way, we're gonna be able to get to that same point. But it requires, right now, largely the interactions that are happening with AI are chat oriented. It's a human supplier and a human editor.
Yeah. So let me ask you though, we talk a lot about what we can do so that we free up a lot of the finance activities, but CFOs also have a really important role in deciding almost the ROI or, decision-making factors about implementing AI in other areas of the business. Have you seen the kind of criteria and, that happens in these processes? Because we know a lot of the pilots are failing when you try to grow them.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think, again, I want to further categorize it for you because we look at AI in kind of three buckets in our AI platform. And I just think it'll be helpful. We do both, we started with quantitative, then we have a generative and quantitative section, like a library of routines so we can supply it all throughout our platform. Then we have our agent. So if you think of those three ways, there's different ways to validate it. In the quantitative, which is where people would use forecasting, right? It's very easy to quantify the value of that. And we're seeing huge improvements where we're giving you a better forecast at a lower effort. So a higher quality forecast with lower effort and at a higher frequency, meaning you can get the forecast more often. It's a higher quality. That's really easy to quantify. And by productizing, you get a higher reliability in the outcome. Instead of having science experiments that never go into production, you get this. So productization is key, is where I'm going. And in certain use cases where it's easy to determine the value, you're going to see those are going to be places where money's going to flow first because the confidence is going to grow. And as we start looking at agents, there's a term that we're saying here in finance, 80% accurate is 0% useful for finance right now. So when you talk about failed implementations, if I'm using a generic LLM to interact with financial data and it's 80% of the time it's accurate, that's 0% useful. I might as well do it myself. So that's going to lead to, if people are experiencing AI in deterministic way to try to solve deterministic problems and they're not getting the right answer, that's going to be a big driver of the failures. Because people have, so it's two things though. It's everybody that writes software catching up to make sure that they can deliver reliable interactions and help with the deterministic problems. It's also public understanding of AI. I'm sure you've seen this, you've talked to so many people, but depending on who you're talking to, AI means different things to different people. And that means there's different expectations on what it can and can't do. And right now, I think generally as a public, we're learning what that value proposition is going to look like and formulating what those expectations are for the outputs of it. So I think it's a broad, it's not one challenge, but ultimately the final say is it's incumbent on software companies in particular, when we're talking about enterprise software, to build productized, repeatable solutions. That's how you end up with a higher success rate, not having companies have to do their own science experiments to try to figure out how to make it into production. That's why you have such a high failure.
Yeah, maybe it's my human resources hat on, but I could think of a lot of other people elements that tank pilots and processes, because sometimes we ask, how do you automate parts of my job versus asking, where does AI add value, and kind of redefine that entire process to actually recreate it with AI. And I don't know that all of what we need to happen requires, more than 80% likelihood. Sometimes you're doing, assessing and doing estimates and doing scenario planning. Fine.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with you. There's value. I'm just saying, to unlock the full potential of AI. Right now, we're stuck in the zone that is, non-deterministic problems with human editors. There's lots of value there. That represents efficiency optimization for us. As humans, it's taking time out, but it's gonna, that if we never solve the deterministic automated process, we wouldn't get to the full potential of AI, is what I'm saying. So
Yeah,
I agree.
basic. You're saying, first of all, bread and butter, right? I mean, you don't do the nice to haves until you've figured out the bread and butter. So it's very basic.
Yeah, and those are really easy problems to solve. There's so many use cases around the organization where, if it's text based, if it's document oriented, LLMs are great at that, and it's easy. And especially if you're talking about summarization, you're talking about basic editing or synthesizing documents, very powerful, huge time savers for somebody to prepare documentation, to help with tech support.
But they're also very good with numbers, and if you give them very clear rules and regulations, right, and that the data is the data, right, that it's accurate, they should be able to do our work faster than we are able to.
I have to not push back on that, but double click on it, because just getting the right data without context is a problem. So you and I can sit here. We have a finance analyst agent in our platform, and I can ask it to find a number. It can locate that number, and it can come back, and we can agree undeniably that it is the right number. But our product also knows the last time that legal entity loaded the information, the last time somebody had pressed calculate or the number was calculated. So just because it located the number doesn't mean that number is correct, right? So it can be good with numbers, it can be good at finding, it can be good interpreting, but what these systems lack is context to really, in order for me to truly say I can use this, it needs this full context, not just that it found the right number. So there's multiple levels of transparency that we need.
And it's kind of like people, right? Because if you've got a junior analyst, even without the AI systems, the same thing would have happened. They could have asked for a number, gotten a number, and delivered it, right? And their manager has more experience. They might ask some follow-up questions and realize that's not a good number because of a number of criteria. So again, we're back to, we need to figure out a way to build in the things we consider relevant experience in whatever profession, and you're dealing with finance, into the systems so that we can let go of the need for a person to drive the wheel.
And that's why that kind of brings me back to my statement that platforms are so important, because they generally have more context, right? Yeah. If I just have a bunch of spot data all over, I'm never going to be able to give it the context without a human contextualizing it for the AI before it gets it. But if I have it in a data repository, in a very unified repository, that we happen to know everything about that number in our platform, so that that amplifies.
Happen to know everything that's important, even if I didn't ask for it. And I think that's
right. Even if you didn't ask for it, I can return that. Here's the right number, but you might want to be careful. You might want to be careful using it because somebody just changed. It hasn't been recalculated in a timely manner. Yeah. And so and that's really, when I'm saying context, what these, the way I look at this, I'm very metaphorical in thinking about it. I look at it as a brain right now that's been trained on, human, this, you think of this reasoning engine, ultra powerful, but it has no spinal cord. It doesn't know about a body. and a different each platform that it can interact with, when it gets wired into that platform, can act like a body that can give it motor skills and knowledge about some universe, i.e. context about that domain. So AI platform or AI is going to have tremendous value in an HR platform if it's connected to all of the contextualized information that the AI platform has. It's going to be the same thing in, IT support functions. And so it's about this amazing brain getting sensory, organs.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I've been having these conversations for a year now, at sometimes more than once a week, and we keep coming back to the nuances of the human value add into the processes that we've never really had to properly map and even understand and name. And when you say, yeah, I've got the number, but I don't, there's a bunch of questions you should be asking me about this number before you take it for granted. These are those nuances that sat in the minds of the levels of managers that then reviewed the document and asked questions, right?
Right.
And people learned. They learned from the first time they said, oh my God, I didn't know, I didn't consider. And then they started considering it. And we build the muscles that allowed us to create, or the experience that allowed us to create that nuances of human value add. And we have not coded it. And you're basically saying, now's the time.
Yeah, that is the giant opportunity. We all recognize that it's undeniable how transformative this technology is going to be. And now we're trying to connect it and recognizing what is it going to take for us to truly turn over agency to get the most out of it. Turning over agency, meaning I trust it to do this task for me.
I'm going to let it go.
And let it go. And that is that's the big opportunity that I see. I'm so excited about it as a software engineer for all these years. It's an amazing technology, and also being a finance practitioner, I also understand. So that's put me squarely focused on this deterministic problem solving, because I'm used to interacting with CFOs, interacting with Wall Street, and there is one right answer, and I have to prove why it's the right answer. I want,
that's really good. So let me ask you, kind of as we wrap, what's the one question you think we should all be asking ourselves about the future of work these days?
I think the future of work is to what extent are we going to do we expect or think that we're going to be able to fully turn over, these capabilities to AI? Right now, my point of view on that is that it's giving superpowers to knowledge workers. It's not replacing them. And I think the big question that many people are asking right now, is this truly a replacement, or is this an optimizer? And I think it's an optimizer. And that's one of the big questions that I think. That doesn't mean that there won't be displacement of certain tasks that are just maybe very low value add in a business. But when you get into the higher order thinking, what I think it's going to do is magnify the capabilities or the potential that these analysts have, because they're just going to have more information synthesized more quickly and be able to be more value add to the company. So I think the big question that I see out there right now is, what is the true impact of AI on the future of work? And I still believe, from what I'm seeing, that it's a grantor of superpowers more than it is a elimination of all kinds of labor.
Okay, lots of people will be happy to hear, although we're seeing wave after wave of people being let go. So I wonder, I think somebody said to me, but if they were doing, the boring data entry kind of work that AI can replace, then go find something better to do. But it's a difficult transition that we're in the middle of.
For sure.
Thank you, Tom, for taking us on this journey. For more about Tom, OneStream, and the AI Pulse Report, check out the links in the podcast description. And remember, your best people do not work because you tell them to, because you pay them to, or because you measure them on it. They work because they want to, because by working for you, they're doing what's important for them in life. Till next time.